This tutorial is going to cover creating a custom shadow inside of Photoshop. Now you may be aware that if you want to create a shadow in Photoshop itself, I'm going to select the spaceman. If I were to go down to FX, there is drop shadow at the bottom of the menu. But the limitation to the drop shadows that are in Photoshop is that it assumes that the surface is a vertical 2D surface. So in this case, I can change the distance, I can change the direction, I change the color of it, blend mode, etc. But it does have its limitations. Because in this instance, I want to create a shadow that falls on the surface of this planet down here, which is curvature and somewhat horizontal in nature. So the first thing I will do is I will hold down the Command key, and I'm going to click on the thumbnail of the spaceman, and you'll see now that it gives me the marching ants around the perimeter of that piece of art. Now I want to introduce a new layer for the drop shadow. So directly below the spaceman, I'll introduce another layer, and I'm going to choose a color of the surface that it's going to fall on. So it's going to be some sort of a red. So I'm going to get my eyedropper tool. I'll hit I, and I'll select the darkest red I can find in my file. And if I chose to, now that I have the color, I could always make a darker value of it using the color picker. Once I've identified the color I want, and I've got the marching ants, or the selection, on a blank layer, I can fill that layer with that particular color. So I'm going to do it with Option and Delete on the keyboard. You can use your paint bucket or a brush if you choose. I'll hit Command D to deselect, V to get my Move tool, and now I'll drag that shadow shape silhouette of my image down onto the surface I'd like it to fall on. So initially it still is a 2D surface, but with my transform tools now I can customize it to make it look as if it's falling on the surface of that planet. So the first thing I'll do is I'll hit Command T to get my transform tools. Now with the transform tools I can right click, and if I choose distort, I can click on any of the boxes around the perimeter of the selection box, and I can move them individually. So this will allow me to lay it down perhaps and give it more of a one-point perspective and put it closer to what I want falling on the surface of that planet below. Once I've got what I want in this regard, I'll hit return, and then I'm going to access the transform tool once again by hitting Command T. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose the warp tool. It's going to give me this mesh that's going to allow me to customize this so it appears to be falling more convincingly on the surface of that red planet. And once I have the contour I want with that, I'm going to change the blend mode so that I can see the planet through the shadow shape. Up in the layer window, I'll click on the word normal and I'll choose multiply. Now I've got the translucence I want. If I wanted to, I could drop the opacity. And one last thing I might do in the context of this tutorial is that I would like to imply much more distance between the floating astronaut and the planet below. So I'll hit Command T. I'll hold my Shift and my Option and drag from a corner, and I'll scale that down. So rule of thumb, the smaller the shadow that's being cast, the further the distance it is from the object that's casting the shadow. And there you have it.